Hello, everybody.
Hi.
It's me, your girl, Veniece.
Oh, and I'm Dr. Crosson.
And we are the ladies from NCBW, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, part of the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania chapter. We did a video for you guys back in May during Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we're coming back this month, July, which is for minorities, Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, just to talk about the Black experience, specifically Black women, since we are members of NCBW. So please stay tuned as we get through this conversation. See ya. So, Dr. Crosson, there's a few things that I remember we talked about from the last conversation, because we kind of did like a teaser when we did specifically towards like Black women in the Black community towards the end of the last video.
Right.
And one thing that stood out to me, as well as people I know who watched the video, was when you talked about how the reason our community is so weary towards doing therapy or things related to mental health is because of us not trusting the process or not trusting the system. So I just wanted you to elaborate on that.
So my first experience with the lack of trust in the system as a provider, not as a consumer or as a member of the community, because I think across the Black diaspora, especially in the United States, we all can say that we've probably seen or had some experience with the system that would cause us not to trust it.
Right.
So I'm speaking now from the perspective of a provider, and I was studying to get my my PhD, my doctorate, and so we needed to do a control group. It was comparing after school programs with structured educational after school programs, and seeing what the difference was. Did it make a difference with self-esteem or academics and things of that nature? And so to get the control group, I had to go to the parents of this particular after school program that was less structured than the other programs. And I can remember people slamming their doors in my face, and I'm like you, right? We're brown together. And they were like, yo, we don't trust the system. I'm like, now I'm the system. And I remember one gentleman, he was like, no, ever since Tuskegee, I'm like,
everybody
hey,
got to bring up Tuskegee,
right? Like, we got to drag up the dirty past. And I'm like, this is different. We're not administering any medications. We're just studying the differences in the child's behavior and self-esteem, as opposed to in the structured program versus the non-structured program. And it was really hard to get participants, and the children were already in the program. All we needed was your okay for us to look at their report cards and their progress in the program. And it was like completely shut down. So it took us a while, and I finally did get parents on board, but it was just like, wow, like
They really didn't trust
the system. Even though I was an African-American woman who was from the community, they did not trust the system. So that was very interesting to me.
Did you take it personally that they kind of associated you with the system?
Well, the first time I heard it, I think I did, because, I was a consumer at some point, and I am still a consumer, and I still get services, medical services, prescriptions. I have a doctor. So yeah, initially I was like, wow, like really, it's like that, right? It's like that. I was like, but then of course, I think it really kind of solidified my understanding or brought together clarity when the gentleman brought up Tuskegee. I'm like, okay, you weren't even alive
when that happened.
Because Tuskegee, so you've been reading. That's number one. You've been reading some books. But I felt that, understood that. And so we went a different approach. I started to catch the parents at the school, because the school was a common ground. So initially, what we were doing was getting addresses from the school, which we had permission to do, and sending letters, going to the houses. Some of the children I had relationships with because I worked in the school, even though they weren't in my after-school program. And I was able to go home with them and say, hey, can I talk to your mom? That didn't work out. They were like, slam, get out of here, whatever, you're on your own. But when I would catch them at the school, and that was like a common ground, and kind of explain, hey, I started out talking about there's no medication, there's no, we're not giving any shots or anything like that. We're not going to administer syphilis, we're just want to look at the report cards.
Right.
That helped bridge a little bit of a gap.
Okay.
And then the teachers that had good rapport with some of the parents were like, no, this is okay. You want your child to be in this program. And then we offered some additional support if they participated, like, if you wanted some free counseling services or something like that, we would be able to compensate you in that manner, not financially.
Right.
So that kind of helped. So we finally got our control group. But that was interesting. Yeah, I did take it personal initially.
And were you the only Black person who was helping with that control group?
I was. It was for my dissertation.
Oh, it was for you. Okay.
Yeah, it was for my dissertation.
But it was people helping you with it.
Not really.
Oh, okay.
You have to kind of do all the legwork. And some of my employees, because I was a supervisor at the time, so some of my staff members were really good at getting the paperwork into me. They were very supportive. And the job I was working for at the time, that doctor was very interested so that he could have data to present to Dauphin County about the effectiveness of the program. So there were other people at the agency invested because it's free research,
Right.
And they were very supportive because I was able to get a paycheck and do this at the same time because it was my job. So it was really an awesome experience.
Do you think that if you were white, that it would have been more difficult for you to get that control program together?
I definitely think if I was white.
Because I think it was easier for you to kind of take yourself back out of like your position and understand where they were coming from, and that's why you were able to reposition how you took it from there.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I didn't think it was going to be difficult because I felt like I'm a member of the community. So, we are from the same background, although I don't know you personally. I'm African American, you're African American. We have a common ground. I serve the children in your school. So I thought, I was surprised at the response, but again, I was viewed as part of the system, which initially was insulting. but
you understood.
But I did understand. I did, and it was a growth period for me to understand how important it is for our people to feel that they can connect regardless of what color we are.
Right.
So that was a big period of time for me to really do some introspection and to realize that just because we're all brown doesn't mean we all think alike or even come from the same makeup as far as what we think is the system, what we know is the system, those types of things. Yeah.
Okay. Because this kind of segues into like another thing I wanted to bring up that you brought up the last conversation about how a lot of like when you say your profession to another Black person and they want to go to a therapist, they want to kind of gravitate towards you because you are Black versus going to someone else.
Right.
And so I know before you had like kind of made a joke like, I can't see every Black person in Harrisburg. But at the same time, I guess when I look at it, I think for a therapist, I would feel more comfortable. Like I kind of suffer from that too, where I kind of have that view set where I feel like I could just be more open in myself.
Yeah.
And like the person can relate to me better if they are Black.
Yeah.
But then like I have like, for example, my mom, she sees a therapist and she's white. And I think she kind of had
Your
that.
mom's white?
No, the therapist.
Joking.
Sorry. The therapist is white. I'm not that light. And I think at the beginning, my mom had like that type of, I don't think she didn't feel as comfortable opening up at first, but now she feels like, like, oh, can't wait for next week.
That's good therapy.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to someone who does feel like, because I'm Black, I should see a Black therapist?
Well, that's not exclusive to just our community. Asians would prefer Asians. Puerto Ricans would prefer Puerto Ricans. People of color tend to prefer people of color, and generally their color a lot of times. The other thing to keep in mind is that African Americans, though we are more open to therapy, we do not receive services as much as our Caucasian counterparts. And Asians are at the bottom of the list. They really are against any type of therapy because they just like to keep things within the family unit. Then Hispanics, and then African Americans. So Caucasians, we're still not quite open to receiving mental health services regardless of what color it is, as compared to our Caucasian counterparts. So that's not exclusive just to our community, wanting to see people of our own type. I think that there is definitely benefit in relatability when you're dealing with a person of color in a lot of ways, because regardless of what financial background you come from, our experiences in the United States are very similar. Racism doesn't discriminate. So what I'm saying is that there is, regardless of how much money we may make or what jobs we have, if someone is truly ignorant and racist, it doesn't matter. They just want to put you in a category of your color of your skin. And I think so that relatability with other females or any person of color is there, and it definitely can be useful. However, because it's not a lot of us in the field, there's not a lot of people of color in the field, I would encourage people to still reach out to a therapist, because there are people that are not of color that have really done some work and are interested in your experience and being able to educate them. A good therapist, regardless of color or race, will want to connect with you, and they'll be willing to ask the tough questions like, hey, I don't know what it's like to be an African American. Can you help me with that? Can you share that experience with me? I had a wonderful supervisor about 20 years ago. She was Caucasian. I can't remember where she was from, but she spent a lot of time at Johns Hopkins and doing therapy. So when she came to Harrisburg, she was my supervisor. And she was great. She was the best supervisor I ever had, because she was a Caucasian woman, but she really went out of her way to say, hey, the population that we're serving, I'm not familiar with that experience. I know that you're from the inner cities of Philadelphia. Can you educate me? Tell me some of the struggles. And that was great, because it's like, hey, I'm not Black, but I would like to have an idea of what the experience is. And so I'm asking questions. And she would do the same thing in therapy. And I can remember with her clients. Yep. She would say to her clients the same thing. And I can remember, because the program did a lot of different things. We worked with pregnant women, mothers, and all different types. And so I can remember referring a young lady to her, and she was like, she's not Black. I'm like, yeah, she's not. I said, but I really think you're going to get a good experience with her. And that young lady came to me several months later and was like, she's great. I never thought I would be able to connect with her. She asked me questions. When she doesn't know, she asks me questions. Right. But that pertains to anybody in therapy. If I don't know, if I wasn't raised in a single parent household, I'm not going to know that experience, regardless of what color I am. Right. So a good therapist would say, I don't know what that feels like to be raised in a single household, if that's the case. How about you tell me how that was. Tell me what it felt like going to school. Tell me what it felt like, doing X, Y, and Z. That allows the power to be leveled out in therapy. And that causes relatability, even if we are from two different backgrounds. Right. So.
Right. Yeah, that helps a lot, because I feel like even you just telling me this now I guess it's important to make sure that you have a therapist who is willing to understand your experiences. Yes. So are there questions that you should ask, whether your therapist is Black, Spanish, white, Asian, so that you do feel that they are trying to connect with you? Because I know some people may like, for example, I know my first time ever going to therapy, I never went back after that specific time, because I didn't feel like the therapist really cared that much. And I've heard that story from other people. And then sometimes I hear stories of people saying like, that one didn't work, so I tried another one. But I was so young, I didn't think that. I just thought, okay, it doesn't work. Yeah. Type of thing. So what type of questions or what should someone look for in a therapist?
Well, I think part of the barriers to therapy, period, is that we, especially as a culture, tend to label people that go to therapy. Okay. Again, we have made some ground where we don't think of people necessarily as being crazy, but we're not there
There's
yet.
Still that stigma.
Yeah, some cultures are like, I have a therapist. Oh God, I'm going to my therapist. I can't wait to see my therapist. And we're not quite there. No. But we have made ground. I'm in Giant, and I'll see a client. They're like, hey, Dr. Crosson, that's my therapist. She good. Hey, HIPAA violation on you. Not on me, on you. Right. So we are getting there. People are a little bit more open, understanding that you don't have to have a serious mental illness to get help. So that's the first part, is kind of getting through to past the barrier of like, why don't I want to go back? Why don't I want to try it? Is it that I don't want the label, or is it just like I don't think it works for real? I tell everyone, finding a good therapist is like finding a good pair of shoes. You gotta try them on. You gotta try out the therapist. You gotta give it a chance. If it's not good with that fit, agencies tend to have other therapists. Like, hey, how about, I meet with another one. Can you recommend somebody different? And it's nothing wrong with saying I would really prefer a person of color, period. It could be a Puerto Rican. It could be African American. Just someone who has some understanding of what it's like to be a woman or a male of color. Once in therapy, you may want to ask questions specifically relating to what you're struggling with. Like, how, do you work with people like myself? Are you comfortable with women, or are you comfortable with men my age? Those types of questions. I would even venture out to say, hey, have you ever been depressed? Because sometimes therapists don't disclose. Historically, we've been told over the years not to disclose, but then as time went on, we learned that sometimes disclosure is really good in rapport building and helping with relatability and leveling out power.
Right.
So the therapist may say, hey, I'm not comfortable with that, but you can ask that question and see how they how they respond, because a therapist who've experienced mental health struggles sometimes really, really understand. Like, hey, I know what you're going through. I lost my mom, or I know what it's like. My mother had a mental health diagnosis as well. Or I had a period of depression when I was in college and I really struggled to get through it. So I do kind of understand where you're coming from. And that can give you some idea of not only their professional skill, but also their understanding and empathy and care for you outside of just, hey, your hour's up. Thank you.
Oh, look at the time.
Because I hear that a lot. And that's a struggle because, we most therapists don't get paid if they don't see people. So you want to try to keep seeing people. And then if you have someone scheduled behind that person, then you don't want the other person waiting. So that is something that's difficult sometimes, knowing when to end the session and ending it in a gentle manner so that you don't feel like the person doesn't care or they're just pushing you out the door. So there's a lot of struggles with that. I tend to run over time. I'm so sorry.
So you probably can't schedule people back to back. It's
but
like
I do anyway.
I was going to say it probably should be like a 15, 30-minute break.
It really should be.
So a topic that the ladies of NCBW had discussed when we were talking about doing this was kind of like the pressures put on Black women by society, and how does that impact their mental health?
Wow, that's a big question. It really is, because there are so many pressures put on women, period.
Like, where do you start?
But women of color,
right.
Oh my goodness, is even additional. So whatever any woman carries is here, but women of color is like, ugh, the pressure has your back breaking,
Right.
I don't even know where to begin with that. I will say that, I see two types of women a lot of time in my practice. I see the workaholic African-American woman who's just doing everything. Or I see the very, very unmotivated African-American woman who really almost have a sense of entitlement, and we're working through getting her to be more independent and to not rely so heavily on a man or on the system. So that's a really wide gap. Right. I very rarely see anyone in the middle. And I try to, in therapy, one of our goals is kind of bring it to the middle. So I want the workaholic to kind of balance it out, enjoy life, maybe not feel that she has to prove herself to the world, because the professional workaholic, a lot of times when you start peeling back the layers in therapy, it's about, I'm not going to be like this one, or I'm not going to be a statistic, and I have to work super hard at my agency to meet the standards. I have to work more than my white counterparts because I'm African American, and those pressures are
that's
real.
What we're taught. I've been told that my whole life.
Yeah.
So
those pressures are real, but at some point it takes a toll on your mental health. It takes a toll on your physical health, and we really don't want to define ourselves completely by a job, a title, a status, or what people think about us.
Right.
So working through those issues and finding the balance so that the job is fulfilling and you're still being productive, but you're not killing yourself. And then the not motivated person, getting them to a place where they have value, like they feel that they have some value, they have something to contribute to an agency or to the community or to the to other people, and they're willing to start to hone in on some skills, get some education, and not be so dependent on the system or a man or their mom or something like that. So that's kind of how I balance out the pressures, is kind of figure out what is your pressure. Sometimes with the unmotivated woman, young lady, her thing is her pressure, she's afraid that she's going to fail, so why try?
Yeah.
Or I'm the only one in my family that graduated from high school. I made it. You're 45. You probably want to have another goal now. Something of that man. Trying to balance it out and identify what's important to them versus what people say we should be doing. And it's so hard, right? That is so hard.
Oh, it's difficult.
Very difficult.
I remember I was watching the podcast Brilliant Idiots with Andrew Schultz and Charlemagne, and they were talking about their expectations of a woman, and we're speaking from like what a black man expects of a black woman and what a white man expects of a white woman.
Yeah.
And it was so significantly different that you wouldn't even thought that they grew up in the same society. Like it was just the expectation that black men have for black women is so much higher than what an expectation. And I mean, Andrew Schultz obviously isn't the man, like the white man of all men, and Charlamagne's not. But still, I was able to relate to it though, because the expectation Charlamagne had for a woman, because he went first, I didn't think was weird because I'm a black woman, and so I just thought that was normal. Yeah. But then when Andrew Schultz started talking about his, I was like, wow, that's it? And I remember he made a joke saying, like, that's why when a white man dates a black woman, it's like he can't let her go because she already feels like she has to meet all of these requirements, and he never had those requirements with her to begin with. Wow. And so I think that adds on to the pressure is that even the ones like the black men, for example, they even have this expectation of us that kind of makes us feel like we have to kind of meet that expectation along with them. Yeah. So, and
I think the expectations of African American males is different than the expectations for Caucasian males as well. And our standards with relationships culturally can vary as well. So I agree with that. Yeah.
And then when you were speaking on like the workaholic type of thing, I can kind of relate to that too, because growing up, I saw my mom do everything. And so that's just naturally me. Like, I don't even think to ask, like, someone to do this for me or take out the trash or cut the grass. Like, growing up, you know, I saw my mom do all of that along with washing the dishes, along with cooking, along with, like, working, along with taking care of me and my brother. Like, you know, I saw her do everything. So I feel like you kind of just mirror the image that you see. And so I don't know if that's in our, I think our community is starting to grow out of it, in reference to like coming from, the single parent homes or where the woman is kind of doing everything. I think that we're slowly getting back into like a two-parent
sharing some responsibility.
Right.
But any relationship that's going to work, there has to be a shared responsibility. And I think that varies from relationship to relationship. You know, some relationships, the woman is the major breadwinner because she's making this, she has this huge job and it's paying really well, and it's cheaper for the husband to stay home and be with the children. It's really nothing wrong with that if that works for that relationship. Right. You know, I can remember early in my marriage, I was my husband was like, well, you know, you don't have to work if you don't choose to during the early periods. Now I'm working now. I work, but
you gotta go back and rethink that decision. Like
in the earlier periods. And I can remember from family members, you know, when I wasn't working, you need to work and help that man. And then when I did work, it was like, you're not at home with the children, you're a horrible mom. It's like we get, it's like you can't win. Yeah. And that's why the importance has to lie on what's important to you and what do you want to achieve out of life, and try to balance out or mitigate the expectations, you know. The other thing we tend to do, especially the workaholic, we go in and we're doing twice as much as what our job requirement causes us to do. A, because there are some expectations for that, because we have to super prove ourselves. And B, because we want to prove ourselves, right? But then when we decrease our level of work, because we're human, our bodies break down, we get sick. Sometimes we just can't stay at that pace. Then the employer has gotten so accustomed to us giving 150%, then now the 100% that we're giving is not enough. So you set yourself up almost for failure, because it's like when we hired you, you were doing 150 things, and now you're only doing 100. Well, my job requirement only requires me to do 100. Yeah, but you were doing 150, and now it looks like we're slacking when we really were doing too much in the beginning, you know? So, yeah.
No, that's so true. That is so true. And going from like the pressures, also dealing with discrimination, and how that affects kind of your mental health. I remember during a meeting we had with some of the members of NCBW, they were speaking on like kind of always feeling like you have to be on edge a lot when you're dealing with certain scenarios or being in front of certain people. And how does that like impact the
anxiety? That's why I'm such a proponent for self-care. Because some workplaces, especially if we're in leadership as women of color, it just brings with it pressure.
Right.
We're a lot of times not viewed as our male counterparts, regardless of what color they are, black or white, And so it's just the nature of society. And then with the climate of our country currently, there's an additional layer of that racism. And so you're going to go into work here. And I tell people, my clients, I tell my peers, I tell my mentors, I tell myself that every night I have to bring it down here. Whether it's reading a book, a hot bath, massage, meditation, reading my Bible, prayer, whatever. I have to do something every day to rejuvenate and restore so that I can go into the office and face that pressure. Because I can't control the pressure. I can complain about it. I can go to HR. But at the end of the day, if that's the culture of the place, it's the culture of the place. I have a choice to make. I can leave, or I can prepare myself every night by doing those things to take care of myself, that I can go in and function effectively. Because if I'm here and I go into work, I only got a little bit left before I explode. And whether that explode is cussing somebody out or yelling or throwing something or being curt in a meeting or just crying profusely or breaking down in the bathroom, none of that's going to look good on the performance review.
Right.
So I have to somehow every day find a way to bring it down. And we don't do that, especially workaholic women. We do not do that. We tend to just keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. Then our body breaks down and we're sick for more days than we want to be sick for. And again, that doesn't look good on a performance review. So I hear my clients and my mentees say, I don't have time. You better find that time because that time is actually going to give you more productive time in the future. But if you don't do it, it's going to catch up with you.
Right.
And so, that's how we manage that. You can find another job, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up with some type of pressure at every job you go to. Some jobs are worse than others, but when we're in leadership and we're people of color, it's just the reality of the workforce.
So another topic that I found interesting, that's been brought up a lot in like research and conversations when talking about mental health and our community is our religious beliefs. Because something that I've witnessed or seen, for example, is people who I know, like they've actually been diagnosed with things like schizophrenia or just more intense illnesses. Then rather than taking their medicine, they prefer to go to the church. And it's nothing against going to the church, but at the same time, do you see that a lot? And what would you say to someone who does do that?
You mean, do I see people with severe mental illness prefer to use the word?
Well, not even necessarily severe. Just
mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness, period.
I don't see that a lot, but I have seen it.
Okay.
And so I am a Christian. And I do believe in divine healing. And I do know personally people that had mental illness, experienced some mental illness, and they were healed through their faith in Christ and through the relationship that they have with the Bible.
Okay.
That doesn't happen for everyone. It doesn't make our God any less real, but God chooses to heal who he chooses to heal. So I do believe in divine healing. I haven't had that a lot. However, when I've had it, one of the things that, we work with is their belief system, you know, and if that's what you believe that to be true, then how can we cope with it until that place of healing comes, because some people are, at the end of the day, regardless of what religion they are, we have to respect people's culture. And that's really something that has been new and upcoming for the last 10, 15 years. It wasn't always that way, It was just like, listen, that's not the right way. We're the experts, And that was historically how therapy was. But now...
I don't know about Buddha, but my God died on the cross.
You just can't do that,
Right.
So we have learned to kind of grow and to support people where they're at. And then through that support, hopefully they will start to take on some skills and tools and begin to implement a different and a healthy type of change. The whole medication thing, though, I have seen more or less just for people, period. I just don't want to take the medication. I believe that there's natural, holistic ways to heal this illness, and I don't want to take medications. And I tell people all the time, we do have a plethora of herbs and natural remedies for different types of mental illnesses as well as physical ailments. But the same, it's kind of like with natural hair. You know, when we all had relaxers, we could use the same stuff. We could use the same gel. We could use the same grease because we all have processed hair. When you start talking about natural hair, it's very individualistic.
Yeah.
So the products that I use for my natural hair, you may not be able to use, though we used to share products when our hair was processed. And that's the same thing with mental illness. When you're looking at natural holistic remedies, that is very personal and it's very individualistic. And you're going to have to try different pieces to find the perfect combination for your mental illness. And that's very expensive.
Yeah.
Any holistic, homeopathic direction is not covered by insurance for the most part, so you're paying out of your pocket.
Right.
And then you're paying for supplements. If the supplements don't work, you got to tweak, you got to pull, you got to go visit with the homeopath. That could be thousands of dollars within a year.
Right.
And so I come from the basis of, there are a lot of natural remedies out there, but until we're able to kind of figure out where you can go to get that, certain disorders really do need medication. And one of which is bipolar disorder. And any type of psychotic disorder. That is, you definitely need some type of medication to get it stabilized.
Right.
And then eventually, if your symptoms become strong enough, then you can start to transition from that to maybe a holistic path. But again, it's very costly. And I tell clients all the time, very expensive.
Right.
If you want these symptoms to go down, you're going to have to try this type of medicine first, natural medicine, regular medicine. No, that's not even the right word. Somewhere else. Traditional medicine.
Right.
And then begin to look into the alternative practice because it's very pricey.
Right.
Depression and anxiety are ones that can be managed more with exercise, diet, logging, and more over-the-counter remedies are out there and readily available to try that it doesn't necessarily have to hit your pocket.
Right.
But when you talk about bipolar disorder and psychotic disorder, those are medications that should be stabilized first by traditional medicine and then take that little transition into the holistic path. But with a holistic practitioner, though.
Right.
Which is pricey.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the religion thing, is like I can't remember exactly what the statistics were, but they were saying that African Americans who go to church, I guess, more consistently, so like rather than like once a week, they might go 3 to 4 times a week, even though our culture is technically statistically 20% more likely to suffer from a mental health ailment of some sort. The ones who are more involved into their religion are less likely to seek help, even though they may still need it.
Definitely, because people, I do agree with that. The church, over the years, traditionally, the church has, not all churches, but when I say the church, you know what I'm saying, in general, has pushed healing and healing and healing. But again, if we study our Bible, God chooses to heal who he chooses to heal. So, right.
And so I'm just saying, do you think that the church adds on to the stigma that our community may feel towards
definitely
the ailment? I guess that's kind of where I was trying to get at.
I definitely agree. Over the course of my training and educational experience, I would say that there has been very little support from the church in terms of what a psychologist does.
Right.
There has been times where I've had clients going to their pastor for some serious stuff like sexual abuse, physical abuse, and unless that pastor has been trained in that area, they're not getting benefits from it, and they'll come back and say, I'm not getting benefits. And that's a trauma disorder.
Right.
People are trained to treat that trauma disorder, and but the pastor at that particular church may feel like they can do all of that and encompass it all, and that's so. Then now my clients come to me.
I had a pastor tell one of my family members one time that he thought she was bipolar. She wasn't bipolar at all. She did end up going to seek help, but it's just like even that, like he obviously wasn't trained in it. Exactly. It was just she was talking about her emotions, and he was like, "Have you tried to seek help in your like bipolar like issues?" And she's like, "What?"
Exactly. Like, where did that come from?
Right.
He's harmless. I have one client that really struggled with that because she was very closely knit to her pastor, but the trauma symptoms were really out of control with her and her child, and the child was experiencing flashbacks, had a lot of behavior problems from a traumatic experience, and the pastor was trying to counsel her and the child, and she was just like, I felt like it wasn't enough. I heard about you. She said, I heard about you from another church member. And so I thought I would come see you. And the pastor, when he found out that she was actually going to a therapist, taking the child to a therapist, and she had discontinued sessions with the pastor, it became very difficult for her. He was making negative comments. She felt the relationship between her and her pastor had become strained. And so I would say, and I can't say that this is for every church.
Of course not.
But I would say that historically, and it has been my experience, at least locally, that the church has not been very supportive with people getting mental health services, and that it definitely adds to the stigma of people. And then I think sometimes leadership takes on issues that they're just not qualified to handle, and that instead of being there to support them morally and within their faith, and then saying, hey, you need to see someone specifically for this disorder, the leader instead would try to treat it all. And it's just, that's not how that works, you know?
So how would, because in that scenario, I'm sure it probably did affect her that she felt like she didn't have that relationship with her pastor anymore because she was seeking a therapist. And I myself am a Christian woman, and you expressed that you were. So how would you relate to somebody who feels like they have this relationship with their pastor, but they do need professional help? How would you kind of tell them that it's okay, you know, like you can still have your relationship with God, you can still have your relationship with church, but, you know, you still need to get the help that you need?
Well, traditionally, African Americans, we think our pastors are like Jesus. You know, we tell them everything.
That's so true.
Everything. And they're human. You know, they're human. You know, and so there are times things that they may not need to know, or they may not be able to handle. You know, they're not God. You know, and so when she got disgruntled, she was ready to leave the church, and I said to her, you know, he's human. Like you know, I understand that you're hurt, but anybody tell that man your business? You know, and you know, and now that you have decided to go a different route, you're angry with him, but you have to understand he's a man just like anybody else. So, you know, maybe want to practice some forgiveness there, you know, and then also share that I tell people all the time, therapy is personal. You don't have to tell anybody that you're going to therapy. That's between you and your therapist. You just say, I have a doctor's appointment. And, you know, you don't have to share that. That's not something that your pastor necessarily has to know if you think it's going to be damaging to your relationship, you know, or to anybody. Because I have children whose parents don't want them to go to therapy because they don't believe in the system, but they're old enough to seek out services on their own. And until you're ready to share that information, it's a personal appointment. Do you tell your mom and dad about your GYN appointment every time you go?
No.
You know, so why must you tell them about this? You know, if it's going to cause you distress. Sure, in a healthy, you know, at one point you may want to share because it's a healthy thing to do about, hey, I've been in therapy and it's been great, but it's not mandatory. It is a private appointment. You know, it's not mandatory. So I would recommend understanding that your relationship with Christ is personal, you know, and it doesn't include you and your pastor. Your relationship is you and Jesus Christ. You know, your pastor can't put you in a heaven or a hell. He's the angel of the local flock. He is in charge of that local flock, and he definitely is a form of authority, but he ain't Jesus. So, you know, yes, listen to and get some guidance, but when it comes down to your personal mental health or personal business within when we're talking about children and needing help, I think that you should be able to make that personal decision. And a lot of pastors really don't want to know all the stuff we tell them. Half the stuff they be like, but they want to be, you know, they love their church, they love their group, so they want to give them. I mean, think about how sometimes people come in my office, and I'm not going to lie to you. If it's something I know I have to child line, there's a piece of me that really just don't want to know it because I'm not going to have to child line, and it's going to cause it's going to cause strain on a relationship. Now, once they tell it, I'm responsible to do something with it. But, you know, it's very different in the church. You know, there may not be mandate reporters. Most churches are not mandate reporters. So unless they're doing something for, in human services, they're not mandate reporters. So some of the stuff that we share is really between us and God, you know? So I would recommend, hey, be confident in the choice that you made. You know, your pastor's human. He may feel some kind of way now, but I'm confident that probably will work out. And as time go on, have a conversation with them. You know, just kind of sharing how you felt during that process.
No, that's true. I agree. I think that hit everything that we wanted to talk today. So,
I hope so.
Before we wrap up, I just want you to remind everyone of any resources that they can look up or how they can go out to seek the help that they may need.
Well, Google is amazing.
Of
so
course.
If you type in therapist, psychotherapist in the Harrisburg area, you would get a whole list of people that come up. But I tell people to call the back of their insurance cards, because the back of the insurance cards is very resourceful. Because not only do they give you a list of therapists, but they give you a list of participating therapists that is going to cover your insurance.
Okay.
So many times people come in and they want to see me, but I don't take their insurance. So they got my name off the internet or from a friend, and they call in, and they're very disappointed when we don't take their insurance. And there's an out-of-pocket sliding scale fee. So I always recommend, just to be safe, why don't you at least call your insurance and try there first. Try who is under your insurance.
Right.
And they have a list. And that's really the best way. Outside of, you could call Google, and you could call Google. You could use Google and find out who's in the area, and you can call that practitioner and say, hey, do you take my insurance? But I just think it's a little bit more effective
if you just call your insurance provider. And for people who don't have insurance,
most places they have a sliding scale fee, based upon income, based upon how much you make. Most places have a sliding scale fee. All therapists are supposed to do pro bono work.
Yeah, I remember you said that last time.
My pro bono hours is always, as soon as one come off, another one comes on. But that's free work.
Okay.
And I forget how many hours that we're supposed to do, but that is something that they highly push and recommend in our field, and so medical practitioners as well. Medical practitioners tend to volunteer at like a local clinic versus having them come to their office. I do both. I do some outside of my office, and I also take some at the office.
Okay. And is there any like phone number hotlines or anything that you can think of off top?
Crisis intervention is always available 24/7. That's 717-232-7511. I know it by heart because there's times when I've been out of the country and, someone's having a meltdown. Other therapists may not be available for a couple hours. So I will call Crisis and say, hey, this is the client. This is the number. They're either homicidal or suicidal. Can you check on them or call them?
Right.
But Crisis also is really good with following up and making sure and checking in and seeing if you got connected to other services and things like that. So that's like a 24-hour hotline.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Crosson, for your time.
Thank you.
And everyone, make sure you check out NCBW Harrisburg Chapter.
Yes.
We are a force to be reckoned with.
Women on the move.
Women on the move. You can find us. I'll have all the information down below in the description box. Please share this video after you watch it. If you took anything from it, make sure you share it with anyone who you feel may need to hear this story, because I think this is a story that we don't really have a lot within our community. Also, we'll be having an event coming up soon where we'll be coming together we'll be having an event called Girl Talk, where we'll be coming together with some women dealing with, their own traumatic experiences. And Dr. Crosson will be helping with that as well.
And I just found that out just now. I'm joking. That's a joke.
So, yes, thank you. Make sure you follow us. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.